Talking Virginia football, we got Jackie Franchuli on the line. ACC kickoff media days about 3 weeks away, and then it's right into fall camp. You can catch Jackie's work at Wahoo's 247 Sports. So let's look at 2024. And certainly the record was not pretty, but I remember tuning in on a Friday night and taking Louisville to the wire on the road. And of course, the big upset against North Carolina and a good Duke team and a number of other close calls. NC State was a really good football team. That was a 3-point game. Boston College went down to the wire. So there were certainly some good things that we saw out of Virginia last season. If we start at quarterback, they have a legitimate quarterback battle, and Tony Muskett's got some experience, of course, from the past. But Anthony Calandria seems to be the guy that most people are excited about. And I certainly, in my viewing, thought that he had the higher ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, last year they had a lot of close losses and a lot of close games. I mean, they won a close game against North Carolina. So the issue that they had last year was they had a lot of injuries. I mean, that team got decimated on the defensive side of the ball. When you look at that D line that they had returning last year, they had some of the most veteran team. I mean, Cam Butler was coming back, Chico Bennett was coming back, Jimmy Carter, Aaron Famui, and then Chico Bennett got hurt during fall camp. Cam Butler hurt against NC State, which is the first ACC game, and never came back. So Virginia had to rely on true freshmen. I mean, they had a true freshman defensive tackle playing a lot of reps, a lot of true freshman pass rusher, defensive end playing a lot of snaps. They had a lot of freshmen in that secondary, which resulted in some big plays being given up. If you look at Virginia, they had a lot of big plays given up in some of these games. If you had a rushing quarterback, they were just going to hammer you. So Virginia had a lot of injuries. I mean, even Tony Muskett got hurt, and you had a freshman quarterback coming in a lot sooner than he expected. So this year, the hope is that they were able to build a lot of experience depth through the transfer portal. And also that D-line that, they were so excited about having back, they're back again. Cam Butler was able to get a waiver from the NCAA because he missed most of the season last year. So he's back again. Chico Bennett decided to come back. Jameer Carter decided to come back. Those freshmen who got reps last year also have that experience underneath their belt. They were able to go in the transfer portal and pick up a few guys in the secondary, a few guys also at linebacker. So, and you have a couple of good weapons on the offensive side of the ball. So you're thinking that they're able to balance the roster a bit more, because that was the issue when that was whole transition from one coaching staff to the other. I mean, the roster was not balanced. They didn't have enough experience at certain positions. And then on the offensive line, I mean, the last 2 years was a musical chairs. They're trying to figure out which starting five they were going to play. We didn't even know that going into last year. This year, all those guys are back that they had in the last game. That starting five is back. So the presumption is you have more chemistry built up on your offense because you know basically what your O-line looks like. Now, for me, the question on the O-line is who's a 6, 7, and 8 guy, and who's your backup center if Brian Stevens goes down, because he's one of their best O-linemen. And the good news, he came back. So that's the thing with Virginia. There's hope. As long as they can fix some of the errors on special teams, because if you look across some of those close game losses, like the game against JMU, you see that JMU I think they blocked a punt and scored. And I think that happened twice last year. And that was a difference in the game. You see a lot of special teams in issues and errors. So if they clean up that and they can stay relatively healthy, then this Virginia team can turn the page and be better. Now, this is a tough schedule. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you're going to at Clemson, you're going to at Notre Dame, even the non-conference schedule, you're facing Maryland and at Coastal Carolina. But you'll see some movement forward if those things happen.
Is there a definite lean right now for the starting quarterback spot? And depending on who wins that, do you think that's going to alter the offensive approach because of the various skill sets?
I don't think it'll alter the offensive kind of approach, because it didn't really alter it last year. I think Tony Muskett doesn't get enough credit for his ability to run, because Anthony Calandria, is always a guy that likes to freelance a little bit more. And even the coaches joke, they try to figure out how to balance that out when it comes to Anthony Calandria, is that, he's a freelancer, but you also need to kind of focus on the script too. And you have that kind of balance they need to teach a young quarterback like that. Right now, there is still a of quarterback battle. Now, I talked to sources, and some people say that they think Tony Muskett is going to be, if he's healthy, is going to be the starting quarterback. They imagine he's the one who's in the lead going into fall camp. And I think there was a lot more noise about Calandria being the guy because no one knew Tony Muskett was going to be even ready in time to practice in the spring. He had shoulder surgery at the end of the season last year. And even Virginia didn't know if he can participate in the spring. They were thinking a little bit of non-contact. And then they were also thinking maybe a couple throws here and there, but limited. And then he went full go in the spring. So he's ahead of schedule. He kind of really focused on his rehab. So, and I think what Tony Muskett is a pretty accurate passer. Before he was injured, I mean, he led Virginia to the victory against North Carolina. So, and now he has a stable offensive line. So he's the veteran. So for Virginia, I think their hope is that Tony Muskett remains healthy and they can redshirt Calandria. I think that's what I've been hearing. That's their probably plan A. But again, they haven't announced a quarterback, and they're not going to until at the end of fall camp. And they're going to have these two battle it out. But I don't think the offense will change. I just think the plan for Des Kitchings and Tony Elliott has been pretty much kind of laid out since they got here. I mean, Brennan Armstrong, they didn't change it for Brennan Armstrong, so I don't think they'll change it between the two quarterbacks.
Malik Washington's an obvious change. He's gone, and one of the best wide receivers in the country, but they bring back quite a bit there and did some work in the transfer portal. Kobe Pace, obviously at running back, is the name that most people recognize as being the lead back there. Didn't rush it too well, 13th in the ACC, but they threw it well, at least in terms of yardage, at number 4 in the conference. So just kind of outline the playmakers on offense.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, how can you replace Malik Washington? I mean, the guy broke several records in his 1 year at Virginia. I mean, you threw the ball at him, he'll find a way to catch that ball. He's going to have a great NFL career. As a Miami Dolphins fan, I was happy that he went to the Dolphins, have a good pass catcher there. But for Virginia, they knew they needed to figure out something at receiver. I mean, the receiver room is pretty crowded, but they knew they needed someone like Malik Washington. So what they did was they only found a guy like Chris Tyree from Notre Dame, who is coming in as a wide receiver and fitting that role that Malik Washington brought. But he was also a Virginia kid. I mean, he went to Thomasdale High School from Chester, Virginia, about an hour and a half away from Virginia's campus or Virginia's grounds. So you're doing those in-state pipelined already. And you brought Andre Green Jr. too, another in-state guy that left the state for college to go to UNC, didn't get on the field at UNC, but it was a 4-star recruit. He came home as well, another wide receiver. Then you have Trell Harris, a very fast guy coming in from Kent State. So these are the guys that Virginia, added experience. And I feel like those are the 3 guys that you're going to see a little bit more. I mean, J.R. Wilson is in his 3rd year in the program. He had a great spring, according to coaches. Even if you talk to the players, they always will point to J.R. Wilson as a guy that really performed well this spring and made lots of leaps from compared to last year. And obviously you have Malachi Fields, who is a name that people should be familiar with from last year. So Virginia does have receiver depth. Now, the thing that I did like was they did add at the tight end position, because not a lot of people talk about why there was a down between Bronco Mendenhall's last season and Tony Elliott's first season. They always discuss the O-line issues, and they always discuss, the offense didn't get changed, or there's no depth at this position. You know what they don't discuss? Jelani Woods. He was no longer part of the team. He went to the NFL. They didn't have Jelani Woods. They didn't have that tight end option. And if you look at the offense that Tony Elliott and Des Kitchings want to do, they need that tight end position in order to that offense to work. So they went and they got 2 tight ends in the portal, the in-state kid from Harvard, and they also got Sage Ennis from Clemson. So you have 1 pass catcher as a tight end and 1 more run blocker. So you still have the ability to have a guy to help you get that run game that Virginia has struggled in recent years to really cement. So you have that addition. So I think that's where I'm more excited about them, was because they were able to get Tyler Neville from Harvard and also Sage Ennis to add to that offense, and also get Sackett Wood back for another year. So I think that's where I'm more excited as far as the playmakers. I mean, the running back room, they have some good, like Noah Vaughn is healthy. He stepped up in the spring at running back. I mentioned all the receivers, but having those tight end options might change how Virginia's offense looks, or at least be able to perform and handle what they were expected to do last year and they weren't able to.
Jackie, if you don't mind, when I hit you with the defense, if you can do your defensive line take again, since that was all
Yeah.
chopped up before. Jackie Franchuli's here breaking down Virginia football for us. The Wahoos go to camp here in about 3 weeks. Check out our realignment video with Jackie as well, talking Virginia's options outside the ACC. Catch Jackie's work at Wahoo's 247 Sports. All right, the defense wasn't too pretty. Most points given up in the ACC. Couldn't get to the quarterback. What is the outlook this season?
I mean, they're more experienced. I mean, last year they were decimated by injuries, and you have guys that were freshmen last year kind of thrown in the fire. It's like, hey, good luck, son. Go enjoy big boy football. Go to Maryland, and now I think some of them had their first start at Maryland. I mean, like, welcome to football. So they now had all those snaps behind them. I think Coach John Radzinski, the defensive coordinator, said they had over 1,400 snaps when it came to freshmen last year. So those guys all have experience. The big key for them is the veterans. They're back. Cam Butler got a medical waiver. He is a defensive end that plays a bandit role for Virginia. He's back. You have Chickle Bennett. He decided to come back. You have Jameer Carter, who he decided to come back. Jason Hammond is a sophomore now. He had experience at freshman. You have Mekhi Buchanan, who had experience as a freshman last year. He's able to also add some good depth there. You have Bryce Carter. You have Ben Smiley. I mean, the D-line is filled with guys who have game experience. So you have that ability to rotate guys, because that is the key to John Radzinski's defense, is the ability to rotate guys up front. Then when you look at what they were able to bring in the transfer portal, they're able to reinforce the secondary. Would I have liked them to add one more corner? Yes. But at the same time, they were able to get in there some of the guys. And you have Antonio Clary, who also got himself another year after being not playing last year with an ankle injury. He's back at safety. You have Jonas Sanker, who's back at safety as well. You have guys like DeAndre Walker, who had his first interception at Boston College. Then I think maybe 2 or 3 plays later, got hurt and left the game. I mean, that was Virginia's luck on the defensive side of the ball last year. So I think Virginia has better experience depth that they needed. And that was something that even defensive tackle coach Kevin Downing said, that Tony Elliott kind of challenged the staff to build that in the offseason. So yes, if they stay healthy, I think this defense will be better than that last year. I think the key for me is to how was the secondary look. I think it's this defense secondary is still the question mark for me, because that cornerback position, will Kempton Shine, which is a guy that get picked up from the transfer portal, is he going to line up across from Keandre Walker? Is that your 2 starting corners? Will Malcolm Green, who transferred in from Clemson last year, who wanted to play corner, will he still be corner, or will he be going at nickel position, which is where he played at Clemson? And I feel like that's where his strength is. Will they move him there? So those are the type of things that we're looking for when we're looking at fall camp.
And Jackie, we talk about players in terms of, okay, how much are they going to develop and be better as sophomores or juniors than they were as freshmen? Well, Tony Elliott, he's a junior of sorts as a head coach. So I got to think that he's more comfortable and confident in the job as a first-time head coach.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Tony Elliott too, I mean, it's hard to think he's going into his 3rd year as a head coach, and this is only his first true football offseason. When you look at his first year, he came in really late in the coaching process, because don't forget, Bronco Mendenhall announced his retirement, that he was stepping down a week into the recruiting period. And then Tony Elliott was hired on the Friday before the dead period. So he didn't even have a recruiting weekend when he got there. So his first recruiting weekend was in January. So he was really behind that first offseason. I mean, his staff wasn't put together for a couple of weeks in January. I remember John Radzinski wasn't hired for a couple of weeks, so they didn't have a defensive coordinator. So that was the first offseason. And unfortunately, the second offseason, this program was hit by tragedy with that shooting on grounds that had a couple of their players murdered. So that offseason, I mean, how could you as a coach focus on the recruiting and football aspect when you're trying to help your team emotionally? So the football was put on the back burner. Yes, they had off-season workouts and winter workouts, but you're healing mentally and emotionally, and also working to the physical aspect, but you're having a lot more to do, and there's no game film, no game plan that a coach can handle with those things. So this program had kind of hit a reset this year. This is the off season for football. So every time fans ask me about, Tony Elliott and grading the staff, I'm like, this is it. This is when you can look at how much this team has grown, how recruiting is going, because this is the true first offseason this staff has done. So I think there's areas of growth. I mean, I've seen it through recruiting. I think they're doing better on the recruiting trail. Are there things that can get better? Yes, but it's still a learning process there. I mean, the facilities coming in is certainly going to help that aspect. I think there's more I think more people are on the same page when you talk to sources behind the scenes. I think people are more behind the scenes and on the same page, I guess on the same wavelength on what they're looking for in recruits, how to handle things, and then in the locker room, because of the way this coaching staff came to be. I mean, the other coach wasn't fired; the other coach just left. So because of that, you had to kind of have a year where players who didn't really buy in were still in the locker room. So you still had a divisive locker room in that first season. You kind of clear that out in the next year, you hit with tragedy, and then you're still clearing it out now. So technically, this is his team now. This is what you think that this is his team. He was able to get the guys that he wanted, get that personalities that he wanted. So this is when you can go, okay, this is when things should start clicking for Tony Elliott and his staff. So I think that's moving in the right direction. I think it's a tough schedule for a coach and that you're wanting to prove. But yeah, I mean, you can point to things at least getting better.
And you mentioned recruiting, Jackie. Right now, number 44 in the nation, according to 247 Sports, 17 hard commits. Whether you want to highlight some guys that have recently committed or any targets that are out there, your thoughts about the recruiting efforts to date.
Yeah, I think what Virginia has done is they're starting to go into these in-state schools and build up relationships that had been lost. I mean, when Bronco Mendenhall and his staff came over, their main connections weren't in state. I mean, they were coming from BYU, so their connections were more among the Midwest, the Western side. So it was hard to get ingrained in the in-state schools. And even when I talk to high school coaches now, what they say is that Virginia has done a good job of coming back into our schools, and it shows on their commitment list. And you've got Montino Williams, Dylan Newton-Shore, two guys from Matawaka High School that chose Virginia. I mean, you have other guys from Indian State, like Isaiah Robinson. He's from the Richmond area. He also committed. So those guys choosing to stay in state is huge for Virginia. Then you have Grayson Reed, an offensive lineman from the DC area, another good get for Virginia. Again, in that 5-hour radius that you want to come to Virginia, kind of keep in state. Those are the type of guys Virginia is going after. And what I like what UVA has done is also going after those prep academy kids in the Northeast, going after a guy like Cole Gear, William Thurber from those prep schools up in, Avon Old Farms, Isaiah Reese coming up for New Hampshire and Exeter Academy. Those are the type of academies or prep schools that Virginia should go into. So they were able to get those guys. And I mean, the evaluations at quarterbacks, I mean, they went after Anthony Calandra and they showed like, hey, this guy can, be a good ACC quarterback. He didn't have many offers. I mean, he was committed to Middle Tennessee State before he flipped his commitment to Virginia. Virginia was able to evaluate that. And then Bjorn Jorgensen, who's a kid from the Sunshine State, he committed to Virginia. I think he's going to be I'm curious to see how his recruitment moves forward, because there's other schools who are taking note of this kid and from the Tampa area. And he committed to Virginia after an unofficial visit. And obviously he took an official as well. So I think Virginia has picked up some good talent there. And obviously going back to the Southeast, going to Georgia, who's just loaded with talent. And honestly, Georgia, Alabama, they can't get all those talents. So Virginia's kind of going in there and getting some good evaluations there. So Virginia's class is good right now. I think they've got some good kids. Now, the only thing I would like them to focus on is there are some kids where I think they still need to work at that DB room. I mean, they just pick up Corey Costner, which is a good athlete out of Maryland as a DB. His mom is a UVA alumnus, so he chose Virginia, but they still need to reinforce that safety and corner position in the high school ranks first. So that's a position that I think Virginia is going to add. I think running back is a position they need to add somebody, right? And also a defensive tackle. I think the guys to look at right now are Nazir Newkirk, which is a wide receiver. I think Virginia is in that mix right there. Messiah Delhomme is another guy that Virginia is in. He's a 4-star in-state DB. Initially I thought this was going to be an Ohio State, Virginia Tech battle between both of them, but sources within the Tidewater area said, hey, don't diss Virginia. I think Virginia's in this. So we're still kind of trying to suss out exactly how far that interest goes, but UVA is in the mix there as well. So there's some good movement there. It's going, honestly, what cures everything is winning on the field. They have to show improvement on the field for this momentum to continue.
Catch Jackie Franchuli's work, Wahoo's 247 Sports. We always appreciate Jackie stopping by, catching us up on Virginia football. And Jackie, we know you got a couple weeks maybe to take a few breaths. And then once ACC kickoffs, media days arrive, then it's full throttle from there on out.
Yeah, I mean, the 22nd is when ACC media days start. And then Virginia has their first media day on the 26th of July. So things are coming up.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.